Good evening, Britannia, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're watching this from. We come to you guys with some news about Westminster, the mother of all parliaments, the UK Parliament, which is in danger. And because of that, they've increased the security. And we also have a letter from the Speaker of the House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle, who has now informed the members of Parliament and their staff on what they should or should not do, essentially, or what they can do to protect themselves. Hello to everybody in the live chat. We're going to come to you guys as usual to get your reaction throughout tonight's live update. Let's talk about this issue because I'm going to show you the letter in a second. But this is not really, again, surprising, mostly because there have been so many people that warned us against this decades ago. Some controversial people, Enoch Powell, for example. But because it was controversial, people ignored his warnings. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people did it as well. Even when people like Tommy Robinson were going around 15 years ago, 20 years ago, warning about what's going to happen if the Liberal side continue to bring people into the country without vetting their backgrounds and hope that everybody will just integrate. Well, this happens. Because this is no longer, in parts of the country, it's no longer multiculturalism. It's one culture dominating over all the other cultures, including the British culture. Now we have a situation where the Lindsay Hoyle and the House authorities have now increased the security around Parliament because a lot of the MPs who voted against a ceasefire a few days ago, last week, are now being targeted. Not really that surprising, but there are also a lot of young people who work for them as their parliamentary researchers and caseworkers, staffers in general, and they are also being targeted. Their offices have been targeted, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Let's go to this letter first. We received that last night. They sent this Lindsay Hoyle to the MPs. Dear colleagues, as you know, the safety and security of all colleagues is a top priority for me and the wider House administration, especially considering the current heightened community tensions, significant increase in protest activity, and spike in abusive and threatening behaviour towards members. The ability of colleagues to securely travel to Westminster and constituency offices to fulfil our duties as elected members is essential. So, I have agreed with IPSA. IPSA is basically the body that's responsible for the salaries and of course everything else, expenses and everything else when it comes to internally their affairs for the MPs and their staff. To temporarily relax the rules around IPSA funded travel so that members can make use of taxis to and from the state or constituency offices where you feel this is necessary in the circumstances. So that's important. So this is not really supposed to be misused just randomly. This is in a situation where you know there's a threat or there's a massive protest outside, Islamist protest, or there's a threat in general, that you can actually now use IPSA to get the taxis. Secondly, that details of these individual journeys will also not be published by IPSA given the security implications. That's actually quite important. When it comes to the details, because IPSA is supposed to be transparent. You know, they're supposed to be, you can check what MPs are spending their money on and everything else, the details of it. But when it comes to this, they're going to be hiding that just for the taxis, obviously in terms of the timing and where they go. The Met Police have also agreed to extend the high visibility on uniformed patrols outside the state perimeter on sitting days, covering the key access points. This will provide greater reassurance for colleagues, staff, and the public who visit. Let's not forget that a lot of people also visit the Houses of Parliament on a daily basis. Lindsay Hoyle continues by saying, I will continue to prioritise these matters over the coming months with the Parliamentary Security Department and review the position on IPSA-funded travel at the end of the year. You can find further information, practical information below. There are also a wide range of existing services provided to support the security of members and staff, which I would encourage colleagues to use. So, obviously, there's a lot of conversation about taxpayers' money and everything else, because obviously the issue that we have currently is, I think Lindsay Hoyle as the Speaker of the Commons and the House authorities simply want to be seen to be doing something. Mostly because the problem is not financial. MPs have enough money. They get good salary. And the rest of the stuff is expensed anyway. So technically speaking, the support that they're providing, the financial part of it should be irrelevant. But the rest of it, including increasing security, the uniformed officers and everything else, and including the fact that IPSA expenses when it comes to this area, maybe, well, I mean, there's no need for us to technically know where they're going, because they could just use private car to go wherever they want anyway. I'm mostly concerned about MPs spending, to find out what they are spending things on rather than the details of the journey. So that I get, that I can compromise. But the financial support I think it's just Parliament being seen to be doing something. That's my opinion in general. There is a live chat, there's super chat, I believe. Let's just quickly go to that before we continue the update. Civil Defence UK, thank you so much for your super chat, Mr. Tusi. Civil Defence UK has been granted Crown endorsement. You will see us alongside of the police ICDS. But I mean, there is the issue. Thank you very much, by the way, for that support. There's the issue with the threats and the targeting that we've already seen over the last few weeks. Joe Stevens, one of the MPs, Labour MPs, whose office was targeted through paint at it and everything else, and the police had to come. This is just a constituency office. So whatever we think of politicians these days and the MPs, at the end of the day, they're still also human beings. So and also, if you want good people to replace them in the future, you kind of want those good people not to be repelled or scared from becoming politicians. After what happened with a couple of the MPs who've now lost their lives because of terrorism, and of course the nutters who came and targeted them, it is highly unlikely that we're going to get so many people being keen to becoming politicians. So it's not, even if it's not about Joe Stevens, who's still a human being despite the fact that her politics is blah, and it's not fair for them to randomly lose their lives or get sacrificed, but it's also goes beyond them. It's about the fact that future generations, if you're going to get good people in politics, you know, ideally you don't want them to be completely terrified of this job. According to Christian Calgary at the Express, last week, hundreds of school children also targeted the East London office of Roshanara Ali after she voted against the amendment, because they assumed that, hey, Roshanara, you're also brown and you're in East London, you should vote with us for ceasefire and Israel to surrender. Obviously, that didn't happen. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting was also targeted on social media for failing to back the ceasefire vote. On one social media user suggested that reminding Mr. Streeting's Muslim and South Asian voters that he is gay, and hoped that he would lose his seat, inshallah. They're outing him again. Yeah, we know that. This is the backwards mentality of these barbaric idiots who are now going around in these Islamic communities, the electorate, saying, let's start a new campaign. If we can't basically take out their lives, let's start a campaign to not just cancel them, but intimidate them by outing them as gay. Right? This is 2023 Britain, and we have basically a backwards culture that is misusing this element of the culture to essentially just go after politicians. Whatever you think of West Streeting or these guys, it's just not fair. And it's also an attack on democracy. Let's not forget that. An attack on Parliament and parliamentarians is an attack on democracy. Again, no matter how terrible they are when they are working in the Chamber of House of Commons. The Green Party joined in the social media pylon, naming all the MPs who failed to vote for an end, ceasefire. But that is also, that needs to be investigated. That needs to be sanctioned, because you can't have a legitimate political party, technically, the Green Party, going with mob rule mentality. You either exercise your democratic powers, and it is a democracy, technically speaking. So you are a political party. You have candidates. You have MPs. You do not join the nutters and the Islamists in doing pylon against your other colleagues and MPs. This is disgusting behaviour that the Green Party have been doing as well, and again, elements of the Labour Party as well. But again, as mass migration continues and lack of integration, you know what we're going to have? we're going to get more people who are not loyal to this country voting and electing their own type of person who's going to go into Parliament. If you think the situation is bad now, with a number of the MPs, especially on the Labour backbenchers and frontbenchers, things could get much worse in the next election and the election after and the election after that. Because they're going to get more power, more voting power, and more, of course, candidates. And then what's going to happen? Are we going to get the majority of the House of Commons basically being full of MPs who are going to be changing legislations going forward? I mean, this is an exaggeration, as an example, exaggeration. For example, to say we are going to ban churches. It's a very exaggerated example. But if you have one culture dominating in the House of Commons in the future, and that culture is not British culture, well, that means that they will have the power to bring in legislation to completely change the fabric of the society. If you think things are bad now, if you think that you have in some local areas, the Sharia courts are being implemented essentially. If you think things are bad now, parts of Luton, Birmingham, Glasgow, many other places, it could get much worse when they have full control of the House of Commons and the House of Lords in this country, in Westminster. We've been talking about the threat when it comes to mass migration and multiculturalism. Again, it's no longer multiculturalism when one culture dominates over all the others. We've been talking about this threat in general, but we've been focusing on the threat that could be on the ground, in the streets. You know, whether it's the protest, abuse, the actual targeting of innocent civilians just because they're not Islamists. But there's also a bigger threat if they get to the position of power. And this will happen. You've seen the interviews of some of these Islamists and pro-jihadists and sympathizers who they happen also to be either first generation or second generation migrants, but they have no loyalty to this country. They continue to say, we want to see the flag of Islam on top of Downing Street, for example. And the whole thing is still being ignored by the establishment because they're so scared of offending some people. And at this point, it's no longer fear. Some were complacent, some of them were complicit, and now they don't even have control over the situation. Forget about the small boats crisis. That's just one part of it. There is no social cohesion in this country anymore. There's absolutely no unity. There's no common objective, which we used to call the country's culture. How many of these people, normal people out there in the country, English British people, can actually, if you stop them on the street, can they describe what British culture is? Can they describe the elements of it? And are they willing to defend it? Are they willing to fight for their country? Just like how all these Israelis and Jews across the world who after the 7th of October got on the plane, went straight to Israel to rejoin IDF, to defend their country. Do we have that right now at this point? Well, I don't see it. Stewie, thank you for your super chat saying we should start by removing the right to vote and to stand for office and benefits, and the NHS for followers of Islam. They will soon bugger off. Well, obviously this will be unconstitutional and in terms of the human rights elements, but also there will be some ordinary people who are just Muslim, but they're not really into any of this nonsense. So that will be also the same tactic that Stalin and of course Mussolini would have used. Again, you can't fight authoritarianism with authoritarianism. You can't fight it with liberalism either, but you need to go with your own logical solution. The best thing to do, again, is not easy to implement, where it's easy as a theory, to have a process to make sure people who are going to be staying here from other countries are loyal to this country. If they're not, the moment a crime occurs, don't care what the crime is, you're out. We have to have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to any misbehavior. That's how you start, at least. I know we have a big battle when it comes to deportations, but again, you could have a conversation about the European judges, the relationship we have with ECHR, with the United Nations, all those agreements and so-called international legal obligations that we have. Well, maybe it's time to revisit those things. Let's go back to this letter that Lindsay Hoyle has sent to the MPs and their staffers, because they've increased security when it comes to the police officers, and they also want to give them more flexibility when it comes to travel to and from Parliament in Westminster. This was last night, 20th of November, that was sent out. We just got it now. Dear colleagues, as you know, the safety and security of all colleagues is a top priority for me and the wider House administration, especially considering the current heightened community tensions, significant increase in protest activity, and spike in abusive and threatening towards members, behavior towards members. So essentially, there are two bits that he's done with IPSA, which is responsible for MPs' salaries and expenses. One, to temporarily relax the rules around IPSA-funded travel so that members can make use of taxis to and from their state or constituency offices where you feel that this is necessary. The details of these individual journeys will also not be published by IPSA given the security implications. So, and of course, high visibility when it comes to police officers and everything else has also been implemented. As I said, there's an issue with the taxpayer-funded issue. But having said that, the problem shouldn't really be, again, it seems like Lindsay Hoyle just wants to be doing something. And generally, the rest of the measures are fine. Having more police officers, more security. But MPs get salaries anyway, as well as the rest of their stuff is expensed. So the idea for them to have the flexibility to get taxis, as the letter said, it's supposed to be in special circumstances, like a protest, Islamist protest, or when there's a threat of Islamism outside the house. Fine, we get it. Get a taxi from the courtyard, get out. But if it's not going to be everyday taxis, then there's no point to use IPSA to pay for the expenses. So that part of it seems a little bit gimmicky to seem more caring, right? As long as the second part is more important, that IPSA, again, that's the body that's responsible for the expenses. And it's mostly transparent, so you can actually go online, find out what your MP is spending money on. The second part is actually important, what he's doing, which is good. That the details of the journeys would not be visible on IPSA. That's fine. I mean, it shouldn't really be visible anyway. I want to know if my MPs is spending money on Apple AirPods or iPads or whatever, but not necessarily, did he travel from Westminster to Covent Garden or Westminster to Richmond? You know, that's irrelevant, because if they want to hide it, if they're doing something dodgy, they could just get a train anyway, or Uber. So that second measure, I support that. The rest of it is interesting. So let's quickly go back to you guys. What's happened in London. So much has happened in London. All this, the threat. Again, let's quickly go to what we've seen so far. All the attacks that's happened so far. Joe Stevens' office, MP, Labour MP, targeted. We had West Streeting being threatened by being outed, which is funny because he's already out as a gay man. The Islamic community want to remind the voters of the constituency, who are mostly Muslim, that he's gay. It's just disgusting behavior. We had hundreds of school children targeting the East London office of Roshanara Ali because she voted against the ceasefire. And this is where we are now. And you have, again, as I also criticized, the Green Party, which is supposed to be a established political party, also joining in with a pile-on mob rule mentality against those MPs who voted against the ceasefire. Let's also not kid ourselves. The UK House of Commons voting on whether there should be a ceasefire in the Middle East is meaningless. You're not going to get whether Khamenei or the Islamic Republic of Iran or Netanyahu having a meeting saying, guys, stop everything. The Labour Party has voted for ceasefire in the UK Parliament. Even if that vote had won, it still would have been completely pointless. So, and now they're having a meltdown, whether it's the Islamists or some of the far left, targeting their own Labour MPs for voting against it. Are you kidding me with this? This is not the behaviour you should have in a liberal democracy. It's because we, again, imported so many people into this country from places that do not respect liberal democracy. But we have to adapt to their way of life, apparently. That's where we are now, at this point. Welsh32 says, thank you for the super chat. Muslim Prime Minister at number 10 one day. Well, as I said, the biggest threat that we have is, again, some of you already joined us earlier in the live stream. I said some of the threats that we've been talking about is with mass migration, lack of integration and multiculturalism is you're going to get problems on the streets. what we've seen over the last few weeks, but worse. We're going to see clashes in schools and other places. But one of the biggest threats and dangers is the fact that the more people who are now going to be coming here and not loyal to the fabric of our society and our culture, then eventually they will outnumber those of us who are loyal but not getting into frontline politics, which means next election and the one after that, and definitely the one after that, you could easily get a situation where anti-British MPs will outnumber pro-British MPs. And I know some people would say, well, even right now we have some traitors in the House of Commons and Islamists. Yeah, but it's not the same as out of 600, 590 of them become completely sympathizers towards Islamism. Then they will have complete democratic power to change every legislation that this country has and the constitution that kept us completely safe, relatively stable until now. Thanks to the liberal politicians over the last few decades who opened the doors, and when we said this is not a good idea, they told us to shut up as people. They are responsible. They have to answer some questions as well. Tony Blair, Angela Merkel, Barack Obama, all of them. But will they answer? No, absolutely not. Leslie Manning says, stop the world. I really want to get off, but can I take my grandchildren with me? It's a big issue. We've been talking about the threat to the West, and threat to especially Britain and Britannia in general. But this applies to the rest of the Western world as well. There's no safe place if you continue this way. And I think there comes a point where maybe the next generation or this generation growing up, people would say, well, where do we go? But then what do you do? Yes, there are some countries left in the world that are generally safer. But if everybody from around the world continue then to go towards those countries, I don't know, wherever it's Japan or Poland or Hungary or whatever, Singapore, then the same thing that happened here will happen there. Because that's mass migration and multiculturalism. So it's a lose-lose situation. The only solution is for people in this country and all the other countries, Denmark, Sweden, France, Germany, Canada, US, to stand up for themselves. It's time to defend your country. It's time to fight for your country. And it doesn't have to be aggressive right now in the street. No one's advocating for any civil battle. Right now, we still technically have democratic power to an extent. So right now, we must elect the right politicians, the right political parties. And I know we are kind of hopeless right now because this is what the options that have been given to us right now. The next year's election. What do you do? Go. This is the problem. But don't lose hope. Always fight back. It's never too late until it's actually over. It's going to be a big battle, but it's already started. And a lot of people still have not risen up, metaphorically. So you have to rise up, Britannia. Rise up and defend her. Defend this land. Otherwise, you don't know whether it's going to be your children or your grandchildren who will not be able to live in this place. That is still safe. That is still, for now, beautiful. Look at the land. Anything outside of London. Forget about London. This is a beautiful place. With great values, great character and personality. And she's been hurt and damaged. She's been stolen. She's been kidnapped by barbarics. It's time to defend Britannia. Let's go to the live chat. Marcus says, one day, if not now, we may have to stand up for what we believe in. This may be by political means, but I think it may end with blood on the streets. This is exactly what we must prevent. And this is the whole point. Richard says, are you proposing yes, in terms of immigration, we have to start talking about mass deportations when it comes to the foreign criminals, those who are disloyal and those who are supporting Islamism. Like anybody who supports, who goes out there and literally vocally, because they're proud of it. They are proud of it. They are supporting vocally Islamism. You must get out. You do not belong here. It's treasonous. We used to have treason laws. What happened? By default, if you support the jihad, you're against the British Constitution, codified or not codified. Chris says, thanks for your info, Maya. Looks like we'll have to get ready for our tomorrows. Yeah. Nikki Watson says, my son is 25. He doesn't want children of his brought into this world. It's sad. I won't have grandchildren, but I don't blame him. QZ says, it's too late. The whole Western world has been given away by previous post-1945 governments. Yeah. There's a comment about the need for, there we go, nationalism. We need a nationalist government, a government that serves the people and no others. Yeah. I mean, it shouldn't really be necessary for us to have this sort of radical conversation about radical policies if we had sensible politicians and governments over the last few decades. And then now they're going to accuse us of being malicious or some sort of vigilante. Or this is not what we're advocating. We are not advocating for anything aggressive or physical. But if you don't do anything about it, the next generation is going to happen. And who's going to stop that? Not even the next generation. It could be even sooner than that. The funny thing is, they warned us about this. You had the Taliban and Al-Qaeda 15, 20 years ago saying, we are going to be sending our soldiers with our values to your countries by pretending to be asylum seekers. And our politicians said, what? No, we don't believe it. Everybody is welcome. We don't have to vet them properly. That was the whole point of Trump's policy with those 6 countries from the Middle East and North Africa when he said we must shut down immigration. When the media went crazy on him saying, oh, he wants to stop all Muslims, he simply was talking about 6 specific countries that we do not work with. We cannot vet people's backgrounds. You can't pick up the phone saying, okay, there's this Iranian guy here. Hello, Iranian government. Can you vouch for them? Or like, can you give us any information as was a criminal in your country or not? Because there's no relationship between American government or the Iranian government. So that's why we're in this mess. Civil Defense UK, thank you again, saying, let's get the pig out of the room. Islam is the problem in my country. The fight back starts now. If they don't come up with sensible policies, you're going to get ordinary people fighting against the others. And again, how are you going to control the country then? This is supposed to be a warning, not a threat. We're not threatening the establishment. We're sending them a warning saying, calm down and do your job properly. Janice Thorne says, I agree with everything you're saying. I've seen this coming for years. People, please wake up. Muslims are not your friends. I mean, as I said, let's differentiate. Genuinely, there are some individual Muslims who just happen just to have the faith because they're born into it, and that's how their brain works. But they're just living their lives quietly. But there's also the conversation a lot of people have had saying the so-called good Muslims, it's time for them to speak out. And if they also care about this country, if instead of staying quiet, they have to also rise up. Like the son of the Hamas leader, former Hamas leader, who basically became a vigilante against his own father and the establishment, and now is in the West. You need that. Otherwise, you can't just have a bunch of white nationalists going out there getting accused of being far-right football hooligans when they're not. How are you going to defend that? How are you going to have a proper debate when one side is being called names and the other side is being completely labeled as angels? Oh, everyone who's from the faith of Islam is basically lovely and angel. Really? Have you asked their opinions on women's issues, on gay rights, and everything else? Really? All ordinary people, good people, regardless of their faith and religion, including Islam. If you're just an ordinary Muslim, everybody has to stand with each other. It's time to defend this country if you really care. Otherwise, what's the point? Anyway, thank you so much. It's time to go and watch Nigel Farage on I'm a Celebrity. I'm trying to keep an eye on that show, mostly because of the debates that happen on the show. Last night there was a debate about Brexit that almost got ugly, but it was actually fine, between Fred and Nigel Farage. It's also good to just zone out for like an hour after spending the whole day reading dark news. Thank you so much for all the love, all the support, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure to subscribe. And if you want to join us as a member to get more exclusive content, join the 2C TV community. The link is in the description on locals and on my 2C, and we are the media.